it's not as easy as everyone seems to be thinking it may be.
Oh, it's not easy. No. It's quite complicated in terms of
Like,
setting a lot of this stuff up.
yeah, I feel like all of the trailers or everything, like the new version of thingy is, oh, it's just you press this tick box and you call it a day. You drag and drop your assets in, put them down, bam, box cancel. And I'm just like,
Yeah, no, it's not that. It's not as easy as all that. However, the connection between so for example, with Unreal Engine's Maya Live Link, right? Being able to control your animated characters inside the Unreal Engine is fantastic for me. Like, I played with it several years ago, and the major problem for me was that I can connect my character to Unreal Engine, but I have to run the character animation preview window, and then I can adjust my animations inside Maya, and it will live feed that bone data over to Unreal Engine's preview window. That doesn't really do anything for me, because what I want to be able to do is animate my character in situ so that the character can respond to the environment or respond to things around them, right? So it looks like they finally implemented that, right? So I can actually control my character in Unreal inside the level layout, right? So
that's pretty cool.
yeah, that's really cool. As well as they now have a control rig inside of Maya. It's a bit clunky to set up as of yet, right? So you have to hook everything up. Sorry?
They have a what inside of Maya now?
Control rig. So you can animate and keyframe inside of Unreal. Did I say Unreal or Maya? If I said Maya, I meant Unreal. So they have a control rig inside of Unreal. And you do have to hook it up via blueprints, right? But once you get it set up, it is literally like the control rig inside of Maya, except Unreal. So that's fantastic too. Yeah, it's fantastic to me because you can animate directly inside of Unreal. But it's again, it's very similar in structure to the Quick Rig or the Human IK rig. So very, very simple bipedal control system, right? But hey, that's great for being able to animate background characters or incidental characters and things like that. You don't have to worry about animating it in Maya, exporting it out, and getting it working, and then importing it in Unreal and all that kind of business, right? So it's kind of cool. The other thing for me is the fact that the level sequencer, you can now render passes. So that's fantastic, right? So I can have an ambient occlusion pass, I can have a specular pass, I can have a whole bunch of other passes that I can bring into a compositor and composite later. So it really truly is a pre-visualization look development tool built for film and television, right? And it's getting better. The big thing that's confusing about working inside of Unreal in terms of putting together your short films and that kind of a thing is that you have to keep straight in your head what is a spawnable asset and what is a possessable asset, right? So with a possessable asset, you've already got the assets running around in your scene. You just possess it and bring it into level sequencer, and then you let go as soon as the cut is finished. Whereas a spawnable asset, the asset doesn't exist other than in the content browser until you spawn it inside the level sequencer, and then when the level sequencer is done, it spawns back out again. Now, that might seem fairly straightforward to keep track of when you're looking at one character, but I'll give you an idea of when I start building cuts inside of the level sequencer. I did this a few years ago. I actually had to have a level visibility layer. So I'd literally be turning levels on and turning levels off. Then I'd have to spawn entire environments in, and then when the entire environment would spawn out, and if I didn't match up my cut correctly, the level underneath would suddenly show up for a few frames. Yeah, so it's like really confusing to keep track of, right? So if there was a way or some sort of outliner type window that can help you keep track of which spawnable assets are currently active in which level sequencer clip, it'd be a lot more fun to piece together cinematics inside of it. But yeah. Other than that, other than the fact that it's a lot more complicated to use than the marketing material sort of portrays, the visual outcomes that the marketing material portrays is true to form. It's true to message, right? Sorry?
No, I'm saying, for sure.
Yeah. Oh, there must be a slight delay, I think, probably. So, okay, let's dive into our good old Excel spreadsheet, right? And I'll get down into the sort of the business of of writing. So I gave you last session. I gave you the option to kind of take a look at the series outline, right? The season 1 episode list, and sort of have a think about what each of the different sort of episodes would kind of involve, right? And then we're going to take that back into our scenes, and then we're going to start to map out what our scenes are going to be, right? So have you guys had any thought about what a good episode would look like?
Well, I did put down. Well, I don't know what to put. I put down. It says the girl is trapped.
Sorry, the girl is what?
You know, it says the girl is trapped in the episode.
Yeah.
I said about we should give like a POV, like point of view of what the girl sees. Like she's inside like a brightly lit up box or like a cube.
Oh yeah. Okay.
And then she can hear like and like 5 different echoes of like souls, so souls of someone, like all the dark souls or something like that.
Right.
And all the people, the demons or people.
Right.
So I was saying like we see a point of view of her in like a box, and then she can hear like distant echoes of like souls speaking, screaming like as if they weren't there no more.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, one of the things I touched on last class was there's definitely this idea of having the girl's story as a C story. Now, the big question then becomes, how does that push our main story thread? How does it serve the main story thread? Why bother knowing about what the girl is going through? What sort of knock-on effect does it have to our 2 main characters? Yeah, it's tough when you're trying to think about it. Yeah, I'll do that.
At the end, you know, like how at the end of like an episode they have like a small cliffhanger. If we put that at the end, it'll be like the audience will be like, "Oh no, we've got to save the get more forward, maybe."
Okay, so at the risk of sounding incredibly cruel, why would our main characters care about what happens to the girl? So let's pare it back, right? So we've got the woman trapped inside the girl's body. She wants to get back into her own body, and we've got her son's gonna kind of help her, right? So in the meantime, the little girl is trapped somewhere. We don't know where. And this is what your story is going to kind of encompass. Your episode outline's going to encompass. Now, there is a danger that the little girl might not be able to come back. That's why they're sort of rushing to try and get her out of the little girl's body, right? But what if they don't care? What if it's like, well, I'm in here. Tough luck about the little girl. We need to find my body soon, right? So what is the thing that makes our principal characters really care about the little girl? Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
We need a justification for that episode to exist. Because no episode can exist unless it's driving the central narrative forward. That's why the worst episode in a television series ever are the group of principal actors gathering around playing a game of poker and going, "You remember when?" And then you have all the flashbacks from all the previous episodes in season 1, and they have a laugh and a chuckle about it. Remember when you got into that? Or the shifting POV episode, which is really annoying, where it's like one event, but then you see it from one character's point of view, but then the other character's point of view sees something different from the same events. Those are filler episodes. They give the production crew a bit of a break.
For some reason, when you said that, the first thing came in my head was Anchorman 2, when they were all talking about their flashback, and then Rick goes, "Remember that time I had a dream?" And they were like, "Rick, that's in your dream."
Yeah.
I just remember the Always Sunny episode where they sort of make fun of people who do flashbacks episodes.
Yeah. Flashback episodes. My God. Okay. So it doesn't sound like you guys have thought much about this. Is that right?
I haven't. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah. Okay, that's cool. So, what I'm gonna do, I think, today is try to kind of walk you through this because it's sort of yeah. Let me just bring up the script and then I'll walk you through how I would break this out. Right. So pop in here. Da-da-da. Have you guys signed up for a free account of Writer Duet?
No, I didn't do that.
Yeah, I highly recommend it. So.
Upcoming writer guys, yeah, like me.
I think I'm still keep logging into my one from college.
Oh right, okay, cool. All right. So, it's not letting me. There we go. Okay. Yeah, we're in the same thing here. So, just making sure. So I'm going to come through and kind of map out what's going on in terms of the scenes that I've got laid out. So we've got the interior, little Sue's bedroom, right? So we got that one shot. Now, when you're originally mapping out a scene, you won't have your written script beside you. So this would be like the first stage in terms of thinking about it, right? So if I were to kind of take a look at this particular scene, I would say, okay, the first thing I want to do is think about the opening image, right? And for me, it's little girl on bed talking about monsters, right? And when we're looking at character flaws, we've got two characters in there. We've got Key, the soldier, right? And then we've got the little girl. I don't think I named her. Right? Now, we don't have to really think about the character flaw for the little girl because she sort of features primarily as a plot device, but it's nice to give her a little bit of personality, right? So I think the one thing maybe we could toy with is undying love for her father. You know, this is a classic psychological thing, right? People who are in any kind of abusive relationship don't see it as abusive, right? Whereas we do on the outside. So maybe there's a little bit of that. Actually, I write that now, and I think when I go through and rewrite the character, it would be nice to have a little bit of that come through, right? Just a little bit. I think I did name her. It's Little Sue, right? And so Key is again an ancillary character. Now, this is a risky thing. So according to William Goldman, who did this in-depth analysis of Saving Private Ryan, it's a risky thing opening up on a character and getting us to like a character who's not actually the main character, right? So that was one of his biggest beefs about Saving Private Ryan, because we open on Private Ryan, and really it's Tom Hanks' story. So we get emotionally invested in Ryan, and then suddenly switch, and we're expected to care about Tom Hanks' character. So it was sort of a difficult emotional transition. So in that regard, I do want to open on Kay. I haven't changed my mind about that for the time being, but it's about trying to figure out what the character flaw is, and then I can flavor this action sequence a little bit. So now that I've put this down, I've realized I haven't really created any kind of flaw for his character in this opening sequence, right? And all he needs is a little one. Let's say it's overconfidence, right? That could make him make a mistake during a crucial moment through this whole thing. So let's think about that. What kind of character flaw would you give this special forces guy who's trying to rescue this little girl? maybe it could be because he features a little bit later on as well. I mean, he's a continuing presence in the story. Maybe he.
What if he has like a daughter and then she's like the same age as little Sue, so he has like an attachment to her?
He has a daughter the same age. That's kind of cool, actually, because of the fact that his superior officer ends up in the body of a girl who reminds him of his daughter. So it's just a really interesting kind of dynamic.
He can't let her die because it'll just make him think that it's his daughter. So he's like, what if that's my daughter? If that situation actually.
So where is his daughter then? Cares so much about the daughter. Where is the daughter?
What if his daughter passed away? Like in with his wife or something like that, or like an illness, something like that. So he's still mourning over her passing away or something like that, and then he sees little Sue.
Yeah, I'm going to jot that down. Notice I'm not overthinking any ideas, right? So this is kind of an important point. When you're in a creative meeting, or when you guys are doing group projects and you're in a group meeting, write everything down, right? Don't go, oh, that's cliche, oh, that's stupid, and then talk your way out of it. You got to write everything down because you don't know what kind of gem that particular idea might produce if you think about it or if you develop it a little bit further. Every idea that you come up with deserves a little bit of development time, most definitely. So what kind of values? Now, we can talk about the character values or we can talk about the values of the scene, right? And we need to identify them as positive or negative, right? So the value of this particular scene is definitely negative, right? And what's at play here emotionally? I'll just put rescue. Maybe Good Samaritan, right? Maybe, right? So because of the fact that what the audience sees is this complete stranger saving another complete stranger, right? So maybe it's a bit of that. What is the excitement of this particular scene? Escaping the trap, right? So yeah, one of the things that I did add when I went back and looked at that, right? Actually, I'll add it in here now. So this is how this type of thing helps, right? So values, negative, Good Samaritan, escaping the trap. So I'm going to insert a scene here where Key's just saying, don't look at anything. And he's about to leave. Little Sue says, why can't we stay here? Over her shoulder. Blood starts flooding. Blood floods down the walls. Or something. Starts to break apart in like timber, like burnt timber or something, right? But we see behind her that the whole room is starting to come apart, right? I like that. This is one of my favorite techniques in terms of maximizing the intensity of a scene, because Little Sue's asking a question that we as the audience can see the answer to straight away. But we don't spend too much time on it because Sue's dad says his thing off screen and it's time for them to go, right? So we don't spend too much time on it, but we feed little snippets of info to our audience. So this is how this helps. Because on this side, as we talk about these things like character flaw and things like that, there's a tendency to think, well, we're overthinking it. It's only like, 4 pages? It's like 4 minutes? Are we overthinking it for 4 minutes? Well, yeah, sometimes you can go a bit too far. But one of the benefits of doing this as an exercise is sometimes it gives you an extra shot or an extra cutaway or an extra moment or an extra beat or a facial expression, right? So it helps to kind of shape the drama a little bit more. And it's actually building on this technique that actors use called throwing each other a bone, where they're literally, well, it's a technique tied to raising the stakes, where two scene partners are acting opposite each other, and one of the scene partners will do something unexpected, and it's throwing the other actor a bone or giving them something that they can react off of to be kind of in the moment, right? So this is what this sort of technique helps to facilitate as you're thinking your way through different scenes. So what is the big problem? And this could be, let's say for this episode, right? The big problem is, Raven is stuck in a little girl. Now I write that down and I realize, why is that a problem? Why is that a problem? Because right now, that's just at MacGuffin level, right? How do we make that problem bigger? We also know she's slowly becoming this corporeal, right? And losing cohesion, right? So we know that's going on. But how do we make this bigger emotionally for the episode? What is the big problem? The girl getting trapped inside her feels to me more like a barrier. It's a barrier or a sidetrack from her achieving what? Now, it'd be interesting if at the beginning of the story, she has a goal, an objective that she's desperately trying to achieve, and suddenly she's trapped in a girl's body. So that totally sidetracks her. This is actually quite important because other than the fact that she's losing cohesion, why does she desperately have to find her son and transplant herself into her son? Why does she have to do it? There's got to be a desperate reason for it. Which also makes me think, what were they doing there at the time? Why? I mean, initially when I wrote this, I just thought, oh, it's their mission. But why would they how can we make that mission have a little bit more impact? Well, there are a few different ways we can do it. So, for example, I can say, they've tried once, half the squad died, and they're, and they're running out of time. Maybe. It still doesn't feel personal enough for me, but maybe that's it. So maybe when the story opens, we're catching these guys on their second attempt, which would really, really make the dialogue a little bit more tense and frantic if I wrote it that way, right? So perhaps this is their second attempt. Okay, that's cool. You don't need to spend much more time than that. Okay, so the problem, how does Raven solve it, right? Right? Transferring into the body of her son. So I've gotten this far and I realized another issue. This is not really her story, right? The story is about Mark. So I'll have to make a note of that. So this is Raven's big problem. But what is Mark's big problem? Oh. But I'm going to leave that for now because we don't know Mark's story yet. We don't know the story of this episode yet. So I'm going to jump ahead and talk about that. So one of the things I'll generally tend to do is I'll go back and I'll map out. I might, in this top sort of section, map out the outline or the log line for the episode, right? You know how you have log lines for movies? It's generally a good exercise to have a log line per episode. Why is that, do you think? Why would it be a good idea to have a log line per episode?
I mean, I could tell it's a good idea, but explaining why, I don't really know.
Okay.
To help the audience.
Sorry?
To help the audience with like a small brief.
No, but they're never going to see that log line, are they? That's just for you.
So you get an idea of what the focus of the episode is without getting distracted by the main
Yes.
reaching arc.
Yes, absolutely. It gives you a nice tight focus, right? So I've used the example in the past, the Iron Giant, the sort of the production log line was, what if a gun had a soul? And that entirely encapsulates the movie. I mean, we're looking at it after the fact, where we've seen the movie, and we listen to the log line, what if a gun had a soul? And go, yeah, that's perfect. Man, that just captures it perfectly, right? But in production, they went the opposite. They came up with that powerful log line and just made sure all the narrative elements pushed it and sort of emphasized it. And that's why it was so powerful, right? As a film. Have you guys seen the Iron Giant?
Hell yeah. I used to love that as a kid.
Yeah. I rank that and Secret of Nim. They're both tied in first place for best animated feature of all time for me.
Wow.
Yeah.
I do like the Iron Giant. I've never seen the other one you mentioned.
Secret of Nim? It's good. I love it. It's I think Don Bluth's first feature film when he broke away from Disney. And I think he felt a little bit trapped by sort of things that govern Disney movies. So when he created The Secret of Nim, A, there's no musical numbers. B, there's blood. Characters die. It's fantastic. It's a really, really good film. And it still holds up. I watched it maybe a few months ago and it still holds up. It's a really, really good animated film. I really recommend it. Yeah. Okay, so that was a sort of a brief taste of me. Oh, yeah, let me actually finish it off. So I'm not going to do a summation because I've read the script to you. You guys know what's going on, right? So, intention, obstacle, and conflict, right? So these are character-based. And so let's talk about Raven's intention, right? So I think that's entirely what's missing. And we've sort of figured it out earlier. But what is Raven after? Because I believe that the obstacle is actually she gets trapped. Right? So she gets trapped. So in that regard, maybe there should be a fight scene between Raven and Bale. Maybe. Just briefly. So that we can see, as a quick glimmer, how emotionally she's invested in taking Bale out. Maybe. I don't know. A fight sequence seems a bit early. A little bit gratuitous. I don't know. What do you guys think? Like, yeah, and it would have to happen actually when she's in the girl's body, wouldn't it? Right? So Bale has taken over her body, but as she straight away gets up, grabs the nearest thing, like an iron pipe. An iron pipe seems to always be everywhere. You ever notice that? You can always find an iron pipe anywhere. Warehouse, hospital, police station, anywhere. You know, always reach out, pick up an iron pipe. So out of the back of a paramedic van, she picks up an iron pipe. Smacks Bale in the head a couple of times, maybe. No, it doesn't work, actually. Because then Bale would just kill her right there. Anyway, there needs to be some sort of we gotta feel that this is really important to her. So we don't have that yet. And because we don't have that, we have no what is the conflict? Right? We've written this, or I've written actually this big opening, and it's just an action sequence, but there's no conflict. Yes, they fight Bale, they fight a demon, but what is the conflict in the scene? What is it? I don't think there is a conflict to the scene. Do you guys know what I mean?
Kind of.
So the conflict, as you're thinking about your various scenes, the conflict needs to help the main narrative, right? So even though we have like a mini conflict between the Marines or the SAS and the demon, what is the main narrative conflict? And you answer that question by saying she wants, but, So we can't answer that yet. She wants this, but then this happens. And that creates the conflict. So that needs thinking about. So I'll generally take that, and then anytime I'm hanging out in the park, I might take the boys to football practice. I'll hang out in the park and I'll mull this over. What is it that she wants in this opening scene? And it's not coming through clear enough, right? So there we go. It's difficult. It's very, very difficult to design an incredibly engaging story, right? Now, again, there might be the the thought that this isn't really necessary. It's going to the nth degree for pretty much a 4-minute scene. But there's a couple of reasons I enjoy doing this. I like to get completely into the heads of my characters so that they're real people, real living, breathing characters. And secondly, I'm looking for ways of making this a page turner, i.e. you're watching every moment because you have questions that need answering, right? So I'm going to write that down here because I think it's good. What is the big question? Right? So what is the big question that's the scene? It could be, who is Bale? Who's just taken over her body? What's going to happen? Are they going to get the demon? But they're not powerful questions, right? There's got to be a really, really big question.
What if Raven can't hit her own body?
What's that?
I was just going over, when Raven's in Little Sue's body?
Yeah.
She can't physically hit her body like her own body.
She can't, I'm sorry, she can't physically what?
She can't hit her own body, so Raven can't hit Raven's body.
Oh, that's interesting. Oh, that's interesting.
And what if Raven's still linked with Sue's emotions? So every time Bale hits Sue's body, she can feel Sue getting hit or something like that.
Oh, yeah, okay. I don't know if I entirely like that, but I do like the concept of infliction of pain. Who does it affect? That's an interesting note. Definitely. Well, the reason why I stepped back from the idea is I like the idea, but there's a lot of intellectual stuff happening there. Like, how would you show that on the screen without being like literal? Like Bale punches and then we jump into the head and we see little Sue go, ah! Like, how do you show that? Cleverly, subtly, in a nice way. So, and it's also establishing rules. And the thing that you have to be careful with establishing rules is that they have to be quick and easily digestible visually, which already this opening suffers from, I think, to a massive degree. There's a lot going on there, and I need to pare it down. Otherwise, the audience will be like, huh? What's going on? What? I don't get it, right? So we have to be very, very careful about introducing too many rules, right? At least at this stage. So it takes a bit of thinking about. Classically, if I get a little bit worried about too much information being jam-packed into the opening 4 pages of something, I'll storyboard it out. So that way I can see in quick thumbnail sketches how it's going to unfold visually, right? Because then I can make a better judgment call of whether or not a sequence will work when it finally hits the screen, right? But interesting thought. But so, what would a big question? What would be a big question? What would one be? Well, just grabbing, an example off the top of my head that doesn't relate to the story. So let's say our main character, our main SAS guy, has a drinking problem. Perhaps he showed up on this mission and he's half cut, right? So the big question would be, is he going to figure it out, get over his drinking problem so he can be a more effective soldier, right? Like he lost that confrontation with Bale because he was half cut, right? Imagine what would have happened if he showed up sober, right? And then you could maybe end the sequence by, him going for a bottle of booze and then smashing it and going, I'm never going to drink again. And then people will sit forward, be like, oh yeah? You probably will. And then suddenly they're watching because they're waiting for the moment that your character screws up and starts drinking again. Right? Really cheesy off the top of my head examples. But that's the idea of the big question. It makes people want to watch. It makes people say, okay, you're going to screw this up, buddy. Or are you ever going to get past that? Right? So those questions, they're what cause what I call a page turner, where you just keep going because you want to figure out what's going on. Right? So we don't have that yet for this. So those are some very, very big important things. Now, I will continue to write this because if you sit there and you puzzle over the big question for more than a day, you're never going to finish the story, because that day will turn into a week, will turn into a month, and you'll just be mulling it over, and you'll never get to the business of writing, right? So you need to kind of move on and keep going. That's why I find this tool incredibly effective, because I can jot down quick notes. And I know that when I go back for a second pass, I'll have these and I'll need to plug those holes a little bit, right? And then that in turn, the big question, in turn gives us Raven's intention, which when coupled with the obstacle should give us the primary conflict of this opening scene, right? Okay, so I'm going to flip over to making notes in the episode list, because I need to figure a few different things out, right? So we're working on episode 1. And I'll maximize this a bit. Right. You can see I've got very, very similar notes, right? What's the big problem? How's it solved? What's the big series problem, right? Okay, so let's go to episode 1, right? So I've got here, Mark has to trust an all-female squad. His misogyny almost costs someone their life. He ends up getting saved. Bale attempts to enter our world, succeeds, but is then immediately trapped. That's gone. He's not trapped inside Mark. He's then immediately trapped inside Raven. So I haven't come back to this since the initial concept was to have Mark with a demon trapped inside his head. And I just thought it would be much more fun, considering that he's got misogynistic tendencies if his mother's trapped inside, right? Now, here's the complexity that I'm going to have to face at some point. So we got the mother being trapped in a little girl, and then the mother being trapped inside the boy, her son. That's like too much. It's a lot, right? It's like two high concepts competing with each other. The concept of a little girl leading a squad of Marines, and then the concept of a boy having his mother trapped inside his head, right? Do you see how those are butting up against each other and making the story not good? Yeah. So it's either A, I have to be brave enough to make a decision and say, look, I'm only telling one story here. Or B, I have to work it in nicely in the pilot so that it all makes sense. And then get rid of the girl by the end of the pilot so that by episode 2, it's all just Mark and Raven's story, right? So in that regard, there's no story yet, right? So what is the issue that Mark is dealing with when he runs into his mom, right? And here's what I thought, right? Because I was bouncing around a few different ideas. It's got to be primarily a ghost story, right? It's just a self-contained ghost story. It's just that the first one is really Mark's story, right? But they're all like a series of of 10, 12 ghost stories. Or creature or monster stories or what have you. I mean, it's the whole ethos behind this, right? So what is it that Mark's trying to deal with that gives them their first obstacle, right? So I had a visual in my head, right? Okay. Oh. Oops. Why is this not? There we go. Oh, crazy. Alt enter. It's not doing it for me. I have an uneditable cell. All right, I'll just jot it down here. So. Oh. Okay. This thing's not obeying my keyboard commands, unfortunately. But let's see if we can, I'll just see if I can jump down in here and add that in. Weird. Never had that happen before. Okay. All right. So the image that I had was, have you guys seen an anime called Lane?
What again?
Lane? I'll just show you an image, right? This is the anime Lane, right? And let's see. Lane. And this is the concept art for her bedroom. Right? So she's uber techie, lives in this kind of world. So I was thinking about this. I was thinking about a couple of different things. Let me walk you through my scattershot brain process, right? So I was thinking about this. I was also thinking about the movie The Ring, how they made a haunted VHS tape somewhat scary. And then I was also thinking about Ghost in the Shell. So I had all these three ideas kind of culminating in this image of Mark sitting in his room, and he's got 3 or 4 PCs, a laptop, tablet, and phone, and he's struggling to try and figure out something. Maybe he's trying to track down a hacker or something, or there's something that he's trying to figure out in his multiple machines, and it's getting darker and darker, his obsession with solving this problem. And there just seems to be maybe dark ideas coming from all of his different computers or what have you. And the idea is that his entire LAN is haunted, right? But what I like about that idea is it's a little bit of a societal statement on just being obsessed with your online existence, or just being obsessed with tech a little bit too much, so that it forms your whole social hemisphere, something like that. And then talk a little bit about addiction and online addiction, and sort of being a metaphor for that. But really, perhaps there's some sort of malignant spirit trying to possess Mark via all his computer kit. When I thought of this, I also thought that's the one way he fits with the rest of the team, the rest of the SAS team, is he's their tech genius, right? So another way that Raven's son proves valuable to her and the team. So I thought that would be a great way to introduce him. And also, it's a little bit unique. Haunted computers, right? I think maybe I've only seen 2 movies that have tried that in the past. And they failed because they were quite cheesy, and it's very difficult to digest the idea of a haunted computer, right? But The Ring did it with VHS tapes. So I think it's just a matter of being kind of clever with it, right? We can play with it on a sort of a Matrix type level, right? So I'm going to jot down my inspirations here, right? So Lane, I might as well put the Matrix down. A little bit of, is it Mr. Robot? Mr. Robot, Ghost in the Shell. And what was the other thing I mentioned? Oh, The Ring, right? So what do you guys think of that? As an opening episode, pilot episode.
Pretty cool.
I'm trying to think. I don't think I've ever seen anything like that, which is also kind of important to me. It'd be nice to sort of hit it with like a really unique and unusual visual that nobody's ever seen before. And then just to make a bold statement, we're going to take classic... Well, it's a bold statement where we say we're going to take classic ghost stories and we're going to set these spirits up against Marines, heavily armed SAS soldiers, and we're going to have computers and tech involved as well. I think that there are some ingredients there that could be really appealing. If you think about Ghostbusters, it's all about tech versus ghosts. So we can play a little bit with that. I mean, they had the wonderful shield of being comedy, so you can get away with a lot more. If it's a comedy, there's a lot more suspension of disbelief. But I think we can put something together where it's tech versus the spiritual realm and somewhat serious. We just have to make sure the science is right. Right? So if the science is right, we might be able to sell this thing, right? So there you go. That was my kind of idea that I'm bringing this week for an episode, right? So now I'm going to go through and try and think about the central beats, right? So the one thing I'll probably jot in here is the climax, right? Or the obligatory scene, right? The climax will be like Mark's rescue and Raven's transfer into his psyche. So that's got to happen, right? But what is that climactic moment? There's got to be some kind of gun battle. Has to be. And Bale has to be somewhat involved. Right? Because it's the pilot, so we got to have the big bad guy there doing his thing and being able to walk away saying, "You're never going to stop me," and walks away, right? So we got to have that kind of a thing. So in a lot of ways, there has to be a link to the ghost. I'm just going to, for the sake of being able to visualize it, I'm just going to call it the Ghost in the Land, right? Because that's kind of what it is, right? But Bale has something to do with it. Wow, cool. Now I've got some nuggets that are just making me think, I want to write this, right? And so that's kind of where you want to be. You got to be to the point where the idea is firing you up in such a way that you really kind of want to write it straight away, right? So, so it still doesn't explain the reason for why Raven needs to go find her son. We need to explain that somehow, right? Hey, kiddo, what's going on?
Am I on camera?
Yeah, just briefly, but
Oh, I didn't.
no, that's okay. No, that's all right.
I
You're
think
good. No, it's okay. You can chill out here if you want. Read
It's
here if
fine,
you want.
I've read 2 books and I'm
Have you?
describing these.
Hey, nice, cool. Okay, so there's that. And then there's also the idea of thinking about how much you want to put in the pilot, or how much you want to put in your episode, just to make it powerful, right? So, actually, I think I'll leave it at that, because that's a lot of ingredients to play with, and now it's time to sort of unpack the specifics, right? Any thoughts or comments on that?
No.
Yeah, so perhaps one of the things that I might add to this is what is my act 1? I'm going a little bit further than I would with this episode breakdown. Now, the reason for doing it this way, right? When you pitch a television show, right? One of the things that they generally expect is not only a pilot script, and a show Bible, but a breakdown as well. So you have to go back and you have to write a paragraph for every single episode through season 1, right? So if I map this out now, not only does it help me sort of in the writing process, but it also helps me when I have to go back and put together my pitch document. I've got those 1 paragraph blurbs on what each episode is about, right? And then, of course, we've got the other episodes, right? The the Nexus, right? So, Mark deals with one of the things that we need to do with the next episode is to introduce the idea of the block of flats being, I don't know, the source, right? So we got to start talking about that. We have to slowly introduce the audience to the fact that these are happening in all these apartments at this particular apartment complex. Which, now that I think about it, the pilot episode kind of needs to take place so that encounter with Little Sue in the pilot has to take place in the apartment complex. We kind of have to start there. It's a bit weird to have this happen somewhere else and then say all the spiritual energy is focused on that apartment, that block of flats. Do you see what I mean? So I'm going to have to go back and fix the pilot in that regard. Yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah. Wait, can it be like after they say on the first part they realize that the block of flats is the source?
Yeah, we can make that realization happen there. Wouldn't they know in advance, though? Not necessarily. They don't have to, right? I mean, it could be a case of, the senior officers never told us. The Central Command never told us that it was all focused in this apartment complex. Right? So it could be that. They could discover it during the pilot. And then so Mark lives in one of the apartments. And then so that closing line of her saying we need to go find my son is not that important, right? Because they're already there. But I think I do a 5 years later thing, right? I think. If I pop down here. Which actually doesn't fit anymore because she's losing cohesion, right? Yeah, somewhere in here. I'm going to put that there already there at the... I'm going to call it a council estate, I guess. All right, so they're already there. This I'm just pausing because it brings up the other question. Maybe we should open on the sun, which really puts the whole Little Sue thing in perspective, right? But again, remember, I have that decision to make whether or not to have Little Sue in the story at all, right? So that's something for me to mull over. But we'll just run with it as we've got it at the moment, right? Okay, so I've sort of rushed through and glossed through my process of taking a look at the script and then balancing it on the Excel spreadsheet, right? And you don't have to use the Excel spreadsheet. I've sent you guys the share link for it. But what I do need you guys to do, just even, for the sake of practice, in terms of weighing narrative elements out and trying to figure it out, is to really think about an episode that you want to do and then mapping it against everything that I've talked about, right? So being able to write what the episode is about and what devices are in play, what is the conscious desire, unconscious desire, what is the moral imperative, all the stuff that we've been talking about. What is the lie that the characters tell themselves, perhaps throughout this episode, or perhaps throughout the season, right? What is the clock on that episode? It doesn't necessarily have to be time, right? It could be something else, something that pushes the impetus to complete whatever task they need to complete by the end of the episode, right? What is the crucible? Why can't the characters just walk away from the episode? No, an example of the crucible was when I said, why should they care about Little Sue? Honestly, like why, right? The Raven could say, oh, she's just collateral damage. I'm just an acceptable loss. Obviously, we can't have that, right? But we need a strong justification as to why Little Sue's important. Just beyond, we need to save the little girl's life. Just beyond that, right? And then we have to make sure that we're fulfilling our contract with the audience, right? So if the show is about just regular humans using tech to defeat spiritual evil, then it's got to happen somewhere in the episode, right?
What's the little girl's link to the demon? She's created the demon.
Yes. That's an interesting idea. I've actually mulled that over. The first time I really liked that idea was an old Twilight Zone episode, I think. I think it was a Twilight Zone episode. The remake of the Twilight Zone, where there was an ex-Vietnam vet who goes to a cafe, and every memory that he has becomes real inside the cafe. And so the people in the cafe freak out and they knock him out. And because he's knocked out, he starts dreaming about his experiences in Vietnam. And then we cut wide and we see the cafe in the middle of the jungle with all these Viet Cong surrounding the cafe. That was really cool, right? So I've always liked that idea of a character being a vessel that brings the demons to life or manifests them in some way. But that's what each of the people in the apartments are doing. And that's what she's doing actually with the ghost of her dad. She is giving the demon an idea of what to become, to kind of manifest in the real world. Right? So if we have, so for example, Mark's demon comes into the world via his computers, because that's his big kind of flaw. That's his thing that he's obsessed with, right? And I chose that as well because it's something I can write about with a certain amount of emotion, right? So that's the other thing. When you come up with a dilemma, it becomes easier and more powerful to write if it's a dilemma that you can relate to a certain degree, right? So, if I were to do an episode with a lonely cat lady, then the demons appear as various cats, right? That kind of a thing, right? So each person in each apartment manifests the demon themselves in whatever problem that they're facing, right? So it's a good idea. I like that. I'm just mulling over, does the little Sue, is she responsible for the whole thing? Like the whole tenement building? That would be a nice little surprise. But then would it be kind of like, you know, waking up from a dream and the whole story didn't actually happen? Which is one of the biggest cop-out endings I've ever seen, and it's always hugely disappointing. None of it was real. It was all just a dream.
What if the building was never haunted? And then, you know how we said about how the little girl dreams and then the ghosts come and then they figure out that, like one of the ghosts figure out that if they can, like, become the host of a human body, they could be mortal.
Yeah,
That's how the building becomes. So all the ghosts are actually tenants of the building, so like occupiers of the building.
Yeah. But I want to blow up the building.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's got to happen, you know? I mean, because there's part of me that wants to design a unique and wonderfully emotional narrative experience, but there's a other side of me that also goes, well, this is an entity that I'm hoping will be a commercial product. And in that regard, we got to have a Jerry Bruckheimer style explosion in there somewhere, you know? As long as we give it meaning and context, that's cool. But, you know, it's like the reason why I want to do superhero stories is because I want to see people being thrown against buildings and cars being whipped across, you know, at each other and things like that. It's just part of the reason why I want to do that. So I kind of like where you're going, though, because the apartment building being the antenna for the spirit world was already done by Ghostbusters, right? So it's kind of like, and I'm using it right now to help me think about what I want to do with it, because I'm going to evolve it away from that. But it's not just Ghostbusters. Buffy the Vampire Slayer had it. So the Hellmouth was a nexus, I believe, underneath the school, underneath the high school, right? So it's been done a few times. Just need to find a clever way to package it. I feel like there should be some sort of like portal or nexus or central point. There's always some kind of geography related to entering and exiting the spirit world, right? You know, on Poltergeist, it was the house, right, that the family lived in, right? So I see where you're going in terms of each tenant themselves physically are a vessel for the demon.
But then you could be like, what if the soldiers find out that they can't put the right spirits back into the spirits of the bodies? So the spirits become the weapon to blow up the building. They sacrifice themselves to save the rest of humanity.
Oh, I see. Interesting.
Blowing up their bodies as well. That is one big explosion. Like that.
Yeah. That is interesting. I wonder if we can separate that from the tenants, right? Because we did have that wonderful idea that I love, that there are minion demons, and we find out later that the minion demons actually still have some of them still have their memories. That's such a cool idea, right? So I would hate to suddenly have that incorporated into the tenants, because I'm picturing the shot of like perhaps like a young boy out his mailbox collecting mail, and he looks over and there's like a demon snarling across the street watching him, but the boy just sees this strange man watching him, right? Stuff like that. It'd be quite fun to play with that a little bit. And I love the fact that we're forcing the audience to humanize the minions a little bit. There's something quite powerful there. I think that's a really interesting idea, one that I want to play with on paper before I decide to accept or reject it, right?
Well, if we do the minions, we could say, like, you know how at the end we could be like, the minions find out they can't go back to their normal lives, so they help the soldiers destroy the demon by using them, they assault as like a bomb.
Yeah. Oh, that's a bit dangerous though. The human bomb kind of idea is a bit dangerous. But no, I'm going to write it down, even though it's not necessarily politically correct, but because there's something interesting there. There's something interesting there though. Yeah, it was in this bit here. Actually, I'm going to give them their own character category because I think we're getting there. We're getting to the point where they're exhibiting their own character traits. So I'm going to insert an additional column over here. We'll come down. Pop that in there. Minions. Okay. So I'm just going to put that in the notes section, I think. They slowly discover their memories and their humanity. Oh, and volunteer their souls as weapons. That's good enough that I have that note there, but vague enough that I can play with different ideas on how that might work. That's cool though. I dig that. That's really good. I'm going to okay, that's cool. That's sort of all I wanted to run through today is just that briefly, just to show you how you start using this to break down your story ideas, and it becomes really, really complex in terms of thinking about all of these elements coming into play. And I think the big difficulty with planning an effective story is being sure that you go down below the surface level, that you're not thinking high concept constantly, right? That I think is the difficulty. And one of the things I like about the spreadsheet that I've set up is it gives me little tick boxes, little reminders, right? That I have to think about what the character wants, what they need, what are the conflicts getting in their way, what is the larger question, all this stuff really forces me to think deeply about the characters. And all of that stuff then starts to come through, right? And that's really kind of important because when you're creating drama, sometimes you find it in these little moments. So with, or you can find it in little affectations. Because with the feature film Dune Drifter, I posted the link for the screening that Mark Price wrote and directed. One of the things that I found really powerful in that is that it's about a space combat pilot being stranded on a planet, trapped out in the middle of nowhere, and an enemy pilot's trapped there with her. Right? It's kind of like the enemy mine sort of context, right? But the interesting thing is that Mark would find these little things to introduce into the story, into the character. So, for example, she can't take off her helmet because the atmosphere is toxic, right? And there are moments where she fights with it, and then she has to re-put it on, and she's covered in sweat after a big altercation with the alien. And then when she finally gets it on, she's got it on in time so the toxicity of the planet doesn't damage her, and there's a hair caught in her face. And there's nothing she can do about it. She tries to blow it out of her way, and it's constantly there in front of her face. Like this little problem. But the wonderful thing about it, and why that resonated with me is, first of all, that little problem becomes a big problem. Because it gets in her way when she's fighting the alien again. Because it obscures your vision a little bit. But it's also a problem that every single one of us can kind of relate to. Right? And the only way you can find that drama is by really digging deep and getting to know your characters, the little minuscule details of your characters. Although I reckon that the haircut and the helmet probably came up during production, probably happened to the actor, and they just said, yeah, let's use it in the story. But either way, it makes it that much more real, that much more believable, right? I'll leave you kind of with one last note. When Kafka wrote Metamorphosis, have you guys heard of Franz Kafka?
No.
Yeah. Yeah, he's a philosopher, and he wrote Metamorphosis, and it's like a massively famous story. I haven't read it myself, but I studied it in English class, so I've read snippets of it. And in Metamorphosis, the whole story is about this this guy who has a lifestyle that he just can't handle, and one day he wakes up and he's a cockroach. And it was a huge metaphor for his existence and all that kind of stuff. This is why Kafka is regarded as one of the premier philosophers of our time. But the way he wrote it was wonderful, right? So he wakes up and he's a cockroach and he can't figure out how to get out of bed. So the physicality of trying to maneuver his limbs and the blankets and sheets being tangled up with his other extra legs and him trying to maneuver out of bed, it just made it that much more believable, right? So this is what I'm talking about getting away from high concept and getting to the emotional core of the story. So high concept is man wakes up and suddenly he's a cockroach. Cool, high concept. You can sell it. You immediately go, yeah, that's interesting, right? But going beyond that and digging deeper into the emotional drama, you can say the guy's struggling to get out of bed. The sheets are tangled up. Now that he's a cockroach, he can't figure out how to reach down and grab those sheets. And he's got this moment where he's struggling. And so that's where we start to find the drama of the story, right? So a lot of stuff that we've talked about has stayed on the high concept level, of course, because this whole thing is driven by high concept. The high concept being a bunch of military guys take on a bunch of ghosts. That's the high concept. The hard part is digging deep into it and trying to find what those dramatic moments are, right? So I'm going to, next class, I'm going to start introducing other narrative philosophies and just bringing in how that deals with sort of human behavioral psychology a little bit. So we're going to do one of those lectures next time. But I'd like you to come at least with a little bit of a breakdown of an episode. You guys do that for me? Sorry?
Which one is to add this to?
You can just add it into the spreadsheet. Now, if you want to take this episode outline as a template, right? You can just right click. I'll just do it now. Move or copy. I'll create a copy of this and move it to the end, right? And then this will be episode 1, right? And it might actually be a good idea to name this. So I'll go, that's, oh, I didn't want to delete it. So episode 0 pilot, right? So you can name your episodes and then just write over top what I've got in there. Perhaps I'll add another row up the top. Just so we've got another row where you can put the title. So in this case, I'll just maybe grab all the way here, merge and center it, and then just call this the pilot. Right? And then so you can do that with episode 1, episode 2, episode 3, right? I'll move this over this way. Okay. Yep, is that cool?
Yeah.
So I'm going to create, just in case you don't have it handy, I'll just create another share link and I'll drop it into our chat. And then we can take it from there. So level 7 research methods. There we go. And anyone with the link. Copy. And I'll pop it in there, right? So you guys can edit this document live, right?
Okay, cool.
Okay, so I think... Yeah, 12 o'clock. Yeah, we're just about done. So, oh, wait a minute. No. Yeah, 12 o'clock. Just about done. Let me take a couple minutes. I'm going to go grab a coffee, and then we'll wrap it up for today. Yep, okay. Let me come back in a couple minutes. Oh, and I'll stick on the old be right back. You guys tell jokes and entertain the stream a little bit.
Alright, boys, let's go.
Alright. Easy
was over.
game.
Alright, let's go, boys. You know what? You can start this. Let me just get my list.
What happened? Okay. What? Will you have a list?
I've got a notes list of best jokes, okay?
Okay, why can't you trust atoms?
Why can't I trust ants?
They make up everything.
Hey guys, parallel lines have so much in common. It's a shame they'll never meet. And then she'll go on. And then said,
What do you call a monkey that loves Doritos?
Grizzly David.
A chipmunk.
I've read that one.
What do you call a cow with two legs?
Ooh.
Lean beef.
Apparently, someone in London gets stabbed every 52 seconds.
That's not a joke, that's just PTSD.
No. Someone stole my Microsoft Office, and they're gonna pay. You have my word.
What's the most terrifying word in nuclear physics?
Nuclear.
Oops. What did Batman say to Robin before they got in the car?
Oh, I know this. God damn it,
Robin, get in the car.
Robin, get in the car.
What you call a gorilla with bananas in his ears?
You know?
Whatever you want because he can't hear you.
What do you call a man with radiant potatoes on his head?
Sunday dinner.
What do you call a ship showrunner?
Oh.
The Christian.
What? Did you hear about the shovel invention? It was groundbreaking. See, Al had that one. He so much.
What did I miss?
Amazing joke.
I'm just gonna watch the stream back later.
Yeah, you can sigh in really disbelief.
Yeah.
I told you it is. I've got it as notes. My notes has got everything. Scripts, jokes, answer, it's got everything. Script, notes, and verbal.
Oh my God! Why am I getting the impression that the only person who's going to do any writing out of this will be Bibbin, and then I'm going to have to read it?
Yeah. Can I do the season finale? I'll be
Yeah, absolutely.
smash the season finale.
Yeah, absolutely. Whatever you want to take a crack at, go for it.
Can I do a bit of explosions everywhere?
Yeah, absolutely. See that's the thing. I'm not against massive battles or explosions or any of the action movie cliches that sort of plague this genre, as long as there's a clever usage of it, or an interesting way of revealing it, right?
Boys, Michael Bay is coming out.
I think the final episode should be the bad guy has the good guy trapped and has presented a 40-minute presentation on exposition.
I actually thought you were going for it.
You know,
I say the ending should be like right at the top of the tower. There should be like I'm busy. There should be like a guy who's engineered these demons for like his diplomat or an idea some kind of health issue. So he thought if he can engineer demons into the world, that he can help others. Genocide, demon genocide. So.
that's another thing that I've actually been mulling over is does Bale have any human servants, like a right-hand man or a high priest of some kind, right? Or somebody who, like a Dr. Frankenstein, gets really obsessed with helping the demons enter our world for some bizarre reason. You know, that might be interesting to think about. Does Bale have any friends?
Should be like Khan from Star Trek.
Okay, so again, one of the reasons why this is sort of important in terms of kind of teaching you guys this in research methods and that kind of a thing is because a deeper understanding of how narrative construction works, or how to build engaging drama by looking deeply into character flaws and things like that, is that it definitely translates over into work that you do in the future, right? So one of the big things that obviously it's more apropos to my time as a concept artist, right? But even when it comes down to doing individual designs, right, I'm constantly thinking about narrative. I'm constantly thinking about where a character has come from, what their journey was, and it dictates to me what they're wearing, right? So if I'm doing costume design, it's very, very much rooted in an understanding of the narrative of that character and so on, right? Prop placement is another massive thing. So if you're doing set deck or layout, you're going to be asking the right questions. You're going to say, well, what is the central drive of the character, right? And so, for example, if you're designing a female character's bedroom, it makes a massive difference if you say that female character hates her high school life, hates everybody that she goes to school with. Or you say that high school girl wants to be the next beauty pageant queen. You can suddenly picture two completely different bedrooms. And prop placement, again, would be completely... So you might make that one beauty pageant character, perhaps her bedroom is like weirdly, unnaturally neat, right? Everything's like orderly and just to an nth degree, obsessive compulsively neat. And then, of course, you have the other female character, who hates her high school experience. You might go, oh, well, perhaps she's a goth. And perhaps she's really messy. And maybe she lives every time she goes to her bedroom, she gravitates around maybe her PC, right? And so everything that's important to her is cluttered around her screen, right? So by understanding that, then you know what you're designing. Now, if you understand the narrative even larger and you say, well, this goth girl is going to have a confrontation with the beauty pageant girl and they're going to realize they're not that different. Then, when you're designing the goth girl's computer monitor, you're going to place props in key locations that when you cross-dissolve to the beauty pageant girl's bedroom, she might have a makeup mirror in front of her, but all the props are in the same, her props are in the same location as the goth girl's props. Do you know what I mean? So it effectively helps you in the design process, understanding where a narrative is going. In addition to that, I think it's far more engaging for the writing portion of any kind of level 7 degree to kind of deal more on the creative writing side, right? And sharpening those skills, right? So there you go. That's my appeal to you guys. Please write for next class.
Okay.
Yeah.
Apple's gonna have to pay to promote notes every time.
But I've always found our discussions over story ideas incredibly fruitful. But at the same time, I want you guys to... I guess one big takeaway for you guys is to realize that even in this kind of a context, I always take every single idea on board. And we've evolved a couple of them, so I'm hoping that you can see even an idea that you might think is throwaway can actually build into something quite cool. The only time I've said I don't like a particular idea is if it steps on another idea in the same story. What I mean by that is that one idea is too similar to a main story component, and therefore the audience will be like, well, which character should I care about, right? So you never want to come up with an idea that stomps on your main narrative's ideas, right? I've seen that recently in a film. Where did I see that? They had a hero moment for a secondary character, which sort of stomped on the main character's big hero moment. I can't remember. I saw it fairly recently. But yeah, you have to watch out for stuff like that. If you expect the audience to give a lot of emotional power to a C character, you're going to have to ask them to crank up that emotion engine again for the main character in the climax. And that can be tiring for an audience. So, there you go. There's that. It's 11:53. We can leave it at that unless you guys have any thoughts or comments.
Okay.
Do you guys find this interesting and helpful in terms of your own ideas for story?
A little bit.
A little bit. Okay. I paused there because I'd like to turn it into something that really helps you guys out a lot, right? So we'll kind of explore a few other ideas in the next class, and then see if we can build on what we're doing here, right?
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, that's it for me. We can call it early if you like. Oh, it's 11:54, 6 minutes early. We can leave it at that and then reconvene here next week and see what ideas you come up with. Now, guys, it's military dudes against the supernatural. The door is wide open, right? Just have a think about it. Come up with something really, really, really cool.
Yeah, I'm gonna put on my. Well, you know which track it is. I'm gonna put on the. Remember that track that I did last year, the year before? It's gonna be my brainstorming track. That is. I'm gonna play that blast and then see how far I go with the episode.
Yeah, music is definitely inspirational. I give you guys only one rule, right? Which you probably already know. And that rule is it's got to happen inside an apartment and it's got to be driven by the tenant, right? So that's the only confinement or the only restriction to your creativity. So let's see what you guys come up with. And again, I don't have to wait till next class. You can drop ideas in Discord and we can talk it back and forth in the days to come. And then gather all of our notes up digitally and then talk about them in next week's session. Yeah, is that cool?
All right. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Okay. That's it then. We'll call it there and I will talk to you guys later. Have a good rest of the afternoon, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah. Cheers. Talk to you later.
Yeah.
Bye. Man, I hope those guys' jokes were good when I had to go grab a cup of coffee. I don't know. I'm dreading playing this whole session back. I think it was a little bit, this session was a bit awkward because number one, I'm a bit tired. Number two, I'm trying to formulate ideas and walk through a process, but at the same time, make sure that it has value for the guys in terms of helping them find their own unique voice as they develop their own particular episode ideas. I am going to mix it up with some theory-based stuff. I think this workshop is okay to a certain degree, but I think it's difficult to be ad hoc creative in a situation like this, especially with writing. Creativity with story development, creativity, it's a lot easier in when you're by yourself. That kind of creativity sort of demands solitary thinking, right? So hopefully we've talked about enough that those guys can go away and come up with some interesting ideas. But next class, definitely, we'll talk a little bit about the theory stuff. Okay, I will leave you guys and we'll talk to you later.